So today I am going to tell you all about the books that I read during the month of September. So as you would know, if you've been around for a little while, I participated in 2 readathons during September. One of those was Becca's Bookopolothon. I will link her channel and her announcement video for this particular readathon in the description below. You should go and check her out. She is great. I also participated in A Touch of Whimsy's Journey Through Wonderland readathon, which was co-hosted by the 2 people from A Touch of Whimsy, Kaylin and Lexi, and also by 2 of the people from Middle Grade Monthly, Gavin and Jade. So I'll link all of their channels in the description below, as well as their announcement videos. I had a great deal of fun doing both of these readathons. I think that is probably evident in the 2 vlogs that I did during the month of September. I will link those vlogs in the description below if you want to go and check out how I went on some of the challenges and just in general having fun doing the readathons. So first of all, I want to show you Becca's Bookopolothon game board. So this is based off of Monopoly. For those people that haven't seen Becca's Bookopoly, she does this on a monthly basis for her own TBR, but during September it was a game where we all participated, and so you roll however many rolls you want to, and you move around the game board, and then whatever you land on is a prompt for the kind of book that you then read. So I did 5 rolls. I didn't get any doubles. If I had I would have had to roll again, but I didn't, so I ended up reading 5 books for this one. I also read some books for the Journey Through Wonderland. So some of the books that I read for Bookopolothon also corresponded to some of the books that I read for this one. So you moved around the board. Some of these are reading challenges, some of these were sort of other challenges. So we have make yourself a cozy reading snack, pick a book for a cozy night in, and the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. I didn't actually go to the Mad Hatter's Tea Party in the end because I live in Australia and all of the hosts live either in the UK or the US. So the times that a lot of these sort of live shows and events happen doesn't really correspond to when I'm actually up and about and doing things. They're often happening either really early in the morning or really late at night for me. So I didn't actually attend that, but at some point I will go ahead and watch the live show. I haven't quite got around to it as time of filming, but I probably will at some point. Anyway, like I said, I had a great time doing both of these readathons, so now I want to talk you through what books I read and tell you what I thought of them. So if you've been around for a little while, you would know that I don't actually rate my books. I was considering doing the core pile rating, which is a rating system that was put together by G over at Book Roast. I will link her channel in the description below as well. You should go and check her out. She's great. So I was considering using that, and I still am. I just haven't quite got around to actually looking into that yet. There's a bit more involved in that, which is great from the point of view of rating, because I think that it's a truer representation of the way that I think about books and the way that I want to potentially give ratings, but it involves more work. So I'm a bit lazy sometimes. I just haven't quite got around to it yet. But anyway, at some point I probably will. I will let you know when and if I do, and then we'll go from there in terms of rating. But for the moment, I'm just going to tell you the books that I read and what I thought of them and what they were about. I will do some stats at the end, tell you genres and all of that sort of thing. So I think I'm just going to go through this in the chronological order of which I finished the books, because some of the books corresponded to both the readathons, so it just makes sense to do it that way for me. So that means that I'm starting with The Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. So this is fairly popular on BookTube at the moment, so I think that most people probably do know what this book is about, but I'll just give you a brief synopsis if you don't know. This is a young adult contemporary fiction. It is about a young woman called Eloni who has a 2-year-old daughter. She is 16, so she had her daughter very, very young. Aloni is attempting to raise her young daughter and also attend school and finish school out. And she absolutely loves to cook, and she really wants to be a chef, but she also is aware that she has a young child and that she needs to be responsible for that young child. She lives with her grandmother, and she's helped by her grandmother to look after her own daughter, but her grandmother is quite elderly, so she's in kind of an unfortunate position because she really wants to be a chef, but it's not necessarily the most stable of work, and it's also not necessarily the most financially prosperous of work. So it's about I think it's about 6 months to a year out of her life in her final year of schooling, and it's about her kind of trying to figure out how all the pieces go together. There's a bit of romance. I really enjoyed this book. I thought that it was really well written. I really liked the character of Aloni. I thought she was really headstrong and really responsible, and tried really hard to make the best of her situation. She was very aware of the world in which she lived and what was going on. She's had some hard knocks dealt to her, not least of all obviously teen pregnancy, but other things in her life that haven't been that easy, but she's making the most of it, and really trying her best for her daughter. So I really liked that character. I thought that it was really well written. I really liked the supporting characters, particularly the main love interest. I thought was really great. Really great guy, really well written, and a really interesting character. There were just a couple of things, and I think it's partly because it's a young adult fiction, which isn't my preferred category to read. I am reading more young adult, but yeah, it's not my preferred category, and I think that sometimes my criticisms of books aren't necessarily all that fair because it's not written for me. It's written for a young adult, and I am not a young adult. Either way, I still thought it was really great. There were just a few little minor sort of turns of phrase that were very stereotypical and quite overused by a lot of young adult fiction authors, particularly contemporary fiction. I think I read she let go of the breath, or she let go of the breath she didn't know she was holding. I think I read like 8 times in this book or something like that, and that is a very overused phrase. Really isn't necessary most of the time, and because it's so overused, it's sort of basically just become a bit of a joke. So that was a bit of a shame, but everyone has their little things that maybe aren't that great, so I'm not going to hold it against her too much. I still really enjoyed this, and I definitely think it's worth a read. Next up I read And Then There Were None, which I downloaded on my e-reader, so I will put an image of it up here. I read this for my book club, so if you have been around for a while, you probably know that I have a in real life book club. It's actually a book into film club, so once a month we read a book and then we watch a corresponding film. Last month's was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I liked this book, but there were some elements of it that I found a little bit confusing, and I didn't necessarily like as much as I could have. So the main one of those was there were a lot of characters and a lot of different viewpoints, so the swapping between all of the different characters actually I found really confusing. Now, I quite like multiple point of view books, so it's not to say that I am not experienced in reading those kinds of books, but I found, I don't know, I think it's because she spends a very short period of time from each different perspective, but we're not really following the character's internal monologue in a way that you do in a lot of cases. So it's very kind of almost bird's eye view of the story and of the setting and of the action, which again is fine. There's certainly nothing wrong with that particular choice of narrative style, and it definitely worked, I think, given the type of book that it is. However, that combined with the fact that we were very swiftly swapping and changing between the different characters, I just found really confusing, and so I had a lot of trouble keeping on top of who we were watching and what character had been accused of what thing. For anyone that doesn't know, I feel like this is probably Agatha Christie's most well-known, or one of her most well-known books. So it's probably quite well-known, the storyline, but nonetheless, I'll give you a very brief synopsis. So it's kind of the blueprint of closed circle mysteries. What takes place is that a number of people are invited under one pretext or another to an island off the coast of, I believe, Devon in the UK. This island is very isolated. It's not super far from the shore, but there's a lot of weather concerns that stops people from getting to the island. Anyway, so multiple different people are coerced under a number of different pretexts to go to this island for this one weekend. So they all gather on this particular occasion, and then they are then told that they're all guilty of various crimes and that they will therefore be punished. So I'm not going to tell you any more than that because I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't read it. It's a great premise. It's a really interesting way of writing. I really liked the idea that there is a person or persons in the world who are kind of taking justice into their own hands. That was really interesting and I really liked that. So like I said, my main complaint with the story was just that switching backwards and forwards between characters very rapidly, which confused me quite a bit, and because you didn't see it wasn't internal monologue of anyone. You didn't really get to know their personality particularly. It was just what was going on the island. There's no real backstory to each of the person except for the crime that they apparently committed. So yeah, I wouldn't say that it's definitely well written. Definitely think that it's worth reading. I wouldn't say that it's my favourite book of Agatha Christie's, let alone my favourite book of all time, but I certainly think it's worth a read and definitely think that it was really well written. I just found it a bit confusing, really. Next up is one of my favourite books that I read this month, and that was Perfectly Preventable Deaths by Deirdre Sullivan. So this I read for the prompt nature on the cover, which was one of the things I landed on in Becca's Bookopoly, and then I also read it because it was spooky and mysterious, and also a really beautiful cover. So those were some of the prompts for the 2 readathons that I read it for. But anyway, this is set in Ballyfran, which is in Ireland. As far as I'm aware, it is a made-up place in Ireland, and it's about these 2 twins whose family moved to this country town, Ballyfran, and it's very mysterious. There's a lot of strange things going on. There's a lot of rumour. Over the years, several young women have been found killed, so there's that kind of looming in the background, but yeah, there's lots of sort of weird, mysterious things going on in the background of the story, sort of rumours around the town. You hear from the perspective of one of the twins, whose name is Catelyn. She's quite inward and quite introverted, and her twin sister is quite gregarious and extroverted. Her twin sister's name is Maddie, and Catelyn has quite a few sort of issues, I guess. Or that's what you learn early on in the book, but then as the book continues, you learn that maybe she doesn't have issues so much as a connection to the paranormal. Things start to get very heated up when Maddie starts dating this somewhat older man. Older than her. He's in his sort of mid-20s, I think. They are teens. They're about 14 or 15. And possibly a bit older, possibly 16 or so. Yeah, there's that sort of heats up the concern from the family, from Catelyn, but also some of the more spooky and magical elements. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. It was one of my favourites of the month. I thought that it was incredibly well written. I really liked Deirdre Sullivan's turn of phrase and her way of writing. I really thought that she was both concise but also descriptive, if that makes sense. I have mentioned in previous videos that that is a very difficult line to tread, but one that I really appreciate when it's done well, because I really like beautiful descriptions, but it doesn't necessarily have to be super vivacious, super over the top. You don't have to describe every little thing. I thought Deirdre Sullivan walked that line really, really well. She has a really beautiful turn of phrase, so when she is describing things, her turn of phrase is spot on. And just, she has exactly the right, for me, use of language that I just thought was beautiful. I thought that she created a really dark and brooding sense of place, a really mysterious backstory, and sort of the rumours of the mystery were really well weaved into the overall story. Catelyn's personality was really well written as well. I really appreciated the way that she was expressing herself in the story. She gave just the perfect amount of time to understanding Catelyn's character, understanding some of Catelyn's issues and concerns, but at the same time weaving a really fast-paced and interesting middle grade story. So definitely one of my favourites. I definitely highly recommend. I think that it's really beautifully written, really interesting. If you like that sort of paranormal, magical realism style of book, I think that you will really enjoy it. It's fast-paced enough that it would be really interesting and engaging for younger people, which is what it's intended for, middle grade, but it's descriptive and well written enough that it's beautiful for older people such as myself. So definitely highly recommend that one. Just going to move slightly because the sun was getting in my eyes, as I'm sure you noticed. Alright, next up is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabah Tahir. So this is another young adult book that I read because it has a fire on the cover, which was the prompt for Becca's Bookopolothon that I landed on. This is the first in a series, which I'm not sure what it's called, but yes, this is the first in a series, and I thought that it was a lot of fun. I had a really good time reading it. I thought that it was quite well written. I wouldn't say that it's the best written book that I've ever read. I wouldn't say that it is a badly written book. I thought it was well written. It was quite fast paced. It was quite interesting. It gave enough information to keep you interested and keep you reading. I quite enjoyed it. I had a great time reading it. I definitely would recommend picking it up. I'm definitely intending to continue reading the series. I really would like to know what is going to happen to the two main characters. But like I said, it's just middle of the road. It wasn't the best, it wasn't the worst, it was enjoyable. That's where I stand. So we follow two main characters, so we swap points of view between the two characters. One is called Leia, and one is called Elias. So Leia is a member of the Scholars, which is a conquered people who are living under the rule of the Marshals, who were the conquerors. The Marshals, as the name suggests, are very warlike and very martial law, and Elias is a member of the Marshals. He is from a family who are very well known within the martial hierarchy and aristocracy, but he doesn't want to be a marshal anymore. It follows both of their storylines and both of them coming up against some pretty hard knocks in life. Yeah, so like I said, it was great fun. It was very easy to read, and I would definitely recommend it if you like young adult fantasy. I think that you would really enjoy it. Alright, then we have The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. This is the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy, the first one being the 5th season. So this is the middle book. I have heard a few different people say that they think this one isn't as good as the 5th season, and that it suffers from that sort of middle book syndrome, whereby it doesn't necessarily have a storyline of its own, but it sort of props up some of the stuff you learn in book 1 and sets up for book 3. I agree with that to some extent. I do think that it is definitely a second book in that sense, that it's answering a lot of the questions that were posed in the first book and setting up a lot of groundwork for the conclusion that will come up in book 3. However, I don't actually think that it suffers because of that. I thought that it was really well written still. I thought that some of the mysteries that are at least somewhat revealed and unraveled in this one that were posed in the first book were still really interesting, and the answers were not what I expected. So I don't want to go into too much detail because this is book 2 in the series. First book we followed 3 different points of view. In this book we followed 2 main points of view. You get to see 2 different people coming to the same or similar conclusions, and so I'm very curious to know what's going to happen in the 3rd book and how it will end up being resolved. So I'm really looking forward to finding that out. One of the negative aspects of filming outside, I've had quite a few people comment on previous videos where I filmed outside saying how beautiful my gardens are. So I really like to film outside when the mood takes me and when I can, but that is one of the negative outcomes. Anyway, so yes, I am very curious to see how this winds up. I don't want to say anything else because it is a second book, and to give you too much information about what happens in the book would give away a lot of spoilers. It is gritty. She doesn't hold back any punches. There's no one particular thing that I could point to and say that's a trigger warning. I don't believe that it is technically classified as grimdark fantasy, but it's definitely gritty. It's definitely got darker elements. It definitely showcases some of the less nice aspects of humanity, shall we say. Yeah, she doesn't pull any punches, but I think that she just has an incredible skill when it comes to world building and when it comes to creating a totally different feeling, but nonetheless a very believable world. Layers upon layers of history and belief structures, and they have all of the things that you have in a society where you have certain traditions and certain ways that you've always done things that aren't necessarily even understood anymore. It's just what people have always thought or what people have always believed, and that's why you do those things, and a lot of those things are being questioned in these books. So she definitely touches on them all, but it's not info dumpy because it's very clear that the characters know exactly what's going on and exactly what people think, and so therefore the expectation is that the readers will know that too, which I think is it's a really important skill for world building, because we are taught a certain history of our world, and we don't have, in our own society, we don't necessarily have all of the pieces, and we don't necessarily always know why we do things. Sometimes we have traditions and belief structures that don't make sense, but they've always been there, so that's why we have them. When people tell their stories, they usually tell their stories as though the people that are listening to those stories have a certain understanding of the backstory of how it came to be, of who they were, of what was happening. So you don't necessarily give all of the information every time you tell a story or an anecdote or what have you. And so that is something that I find really great about people like N.K. Jemisin, is that it's very clear the members of the society to which these people belong already have that knowledge and understanding, or the opposite end. They already have that inbuilt assumption that they don't need it all explained. They don't need an info dump. So I think it's a really interesting line, and I think it would be very difficult to write, but I really appreciate when it's done well, and it's done really, really well by N.K. Jemisin in the Broken Earth trilogy. Alright, next up we have Esme's Gift by Elizabeth Foster. This is a middle grade portal fantasy. This is about a young girl called Esme who goes into another world called Aeolia from our world. So she's from our world as we know it, and she travels by portal into this other world, and she has adventures in this other world. Her mother has been traveling between the worlds for a long time, and in the first book, this is the second book, in the first book, Esme's Wish, Esme discovers that her mother has been travelling between the worlds, and she goes to attempt to locate her mother, and now she has located her mother, and this is what happens. So this is the second book, like I said, so I don't want to go into any more detail about the storyline. I thought this was quite well written. I enjoyed both this one and the first one. The first one was actually sent to me for review by the author, who is Elizabeth Foster, like I said. So this book was a thank you gift, and it is signed by the author. So thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. Yeah, I really did think this was a really good fun read. It's well paced, it's well written, it's definitely interesting, it's lots of fun. It's definitely middle grade, and I say that to say that I am not the intended audience, so although I definitely enjoyed it, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's my favourite book, but I still think it's really fun, and I still think that anyone that loves middle grade, or the children who it's intended for, would really, really enjoy it. I can think of quite a few children who I'd love to give these books to and love to read to, and I think would really enjoy it. If you like the Chronicles of Narnia and those sorts of books, then I definitely think that you will like these books, and I would definitely recommend picking them up. They're lots of fun, very whimsical and childlike and adventurous, and yeah, just really great fun. So that was Esme's Gift by Elizabeth Foster. Next up we have Never Tell by Catherine Orton. This is another middle grade. It is set in Siberia, and it is about a young girl called Lena who escapes from a concentration camp in Siberia during the 1930s or so, during the time of Stalin, and it is a mix of adventure, prison escape, and Russian folklore. I really enjoyed this one as well. It was really well paced, it was really fast paced, there was a lot of stuff happening. You couldn't have turn the page almost without a new thing popping up or a new adventure happening. So in that regard it was really well paced, particularly for a middle grade book. It's good to have those move along at quite a clip, which this one did. I thought that I don't really know much about Russian folklore, so I couldn't say how accurate it was, but I definitely thought that it was really well written, and I really... Sorry, let's see if I can adjust yet again. That's a bit better. Alright, where were we? Yes, so I don't know how accurate from a folklore perspective this book is, but I definitely thought that it wove those sorts of fairy story, folklore types of stories really well into the action of the story. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about the ridiculous number of adjustments I've had to make in this video. And now I'm going to do it again. There we go. Alright, final one, hopefully. Yeah, so I thought it was woven really well together with the action of the story, and I just thought that it was really fun and really well written. Again, it wasn't necessarily intended for me. It is definitely middle grade, but having said that, I definitely thought it was a good read, and again I can think of several children who I think would really enjoy this book, so yeah, I'm glad to have read it. Last full book that I finished during September was Shards of Honour by Lois McMaster Bujold. So I read this for the Set in the Future prompt that I landed on for Becca's Bookopoly. This book really surprised me, partly because I actually enjoyed it more than I anticipated, and partly because it was basically nothing like I anticipated. So this is science fiction. It is set in the future. It's set on 2 different planets. It sounds like it's going to be very action-packed, very much your kind of blaster action sequence heavy story. There are a lot of action sequences and a lot of spacefight blaster action sequences, but not as many as I thought, and it certainly wasn't the main point of the story. So we actually follow a woman called Cordelia Naismith. You get a lot of the internal monologue, or her internal thoughts and her internal monologue about what's going on and about the action that's taking place. So you don't actually see a huge amount of the action. You're not actually reading about a huge amount of the action. A lot of the sort of bigger battles that occur in this book happen off screen, as it were, and we are seeing Cordelia and a few of the other main characters as they go about whatever they're going about, whatever is happening for them, but it's happening with this backdrop of lots of action and war. They're kind of involved in the more secretive internal politics. So yeah, it really surprised me in that regard. I really wasn't expecting that, and therefore I thought it was a lot more interesting and a lot more nuanced than I was expecting. So I really enjoyed this book, and definitely I think if you like sci-fi, I think you would enjoy the book. There's definitely still a lot of sci-fi elements. It happens in space, happens on different planets. There's a lot of action that takes place in big spaceships. So from that point of view, I think that it's a great deal of fun. But from the point of view of a nuanced look at the way that high command takes place, some of the stuff that happens in the background when it comes to these war stories, and a lot of nuance in the way that different personalities shape what's occurring, I think that you would really enjoy that from this aspect as well. So I think it's a very thoughtful sci-fi, and I have to admit that I have had a tendency to think of sci-fi as not necessarily being that thoughtful or that nuanced in the past, so I now am reconsidering my assumptions about sci-fi, which is a lot in part thanks to this book. So my partner Rowan, who initially suggested that I read this book back in March, which I will link that video in the description below. It is one of the We Choose Each Other's TBR videos, that the first one that I made, which I made with Rowan. Yeah, he suggested that I read this book, which I didn't quite get around to in March, but I did this time and I definitely enjoy it. So thank you, Rowan, for suggesting this book to me. Okay, so I have 2 more books that I want to talk to you about before I go on and tell you the stats, but neither of those books are books that I finished. So the first one is Achieving Social Justice by Larissa Brent, which, if you have been watching for a while, you would know that I've been trying to read this book for far too long. In my vlog, which I put up last Wednesday, I did say that I'm now halfway through, so maybe I don't need to be chastised for not finishing it by the end of September. However, I've only probably read another 20 pages since then, and it is the 8th, I think, of October. Just trying to find my phone so I can see what date it actually is. The 6th of October. So maybe I do need chastising after all. But I'm getting there. I'm working on it. And it's quite dry. It's non-fiction, so not that non-fiction is always dry, but this one is quite dry and very in-depth. There's a lot of information packed into quite a small book, so I think that's why it's taking me a while to get through, but definitely I'm making progress. So anyway, there's that. And the next book that I want to talk to you about is my Did Not Finish, or DNF, for the month. I've been very fortunate this year. I've actually not had any, until this one book, any DNFs. I've had a few that I haven't really liked all that much, but I haven't had any DNFs. But it will probably not surprise any of you at all to learn that the book that I DNF'd was City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare. I'm sorry guys, I tried. I really, really did try. I read the first 3 books of The Mortal Instruments. I read all 3 books of The Infernal Devices. And then I went back to The Mortal Instruments. I got halfway through City of Fallen Angels and I just couldn't. I just couldn't. Now, I've said in a number of different videos that Cassandra Clare's writing drives me up the wall. That is still the case. She definitely improved in The Infernal Devices. I could definitely see that 5 years away from writing helped to mature her writing quite a bit, but I still don't think that it's particularly mature. It takes a lot of shortcuts and she uses a lot of tropes that are very well worn and very stereotypical, and it's very formulaic, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and certainly if you're in the mood for something that is easy to read, that is formulaic and you know you like the formula. The problem is for me that I don't really love the formula of love triangles or the for whatever reason can't get together formula, some star-crossed lovers type of formula. And I think the reason for that, not so much the trope I think that I don't like, I think that when a trope is well worn and overdone, it has to be really well done, or it has to be one of the first of its kind. It has to be the trailblazer for it to be something that I don't mind, if that makes sense. Jace is not Darcy and Clary is not Lizzie. Don't give me a well-worn trope, an overdone trope, and do it half-heartedly and with really annoying characters and expect me to like it. And I'm really sorry to all those people that love Jace and Clary, of which I know there are many of you out there, but I can't stand Jace and Clary, and that is the main reason why I didn't end up being able to finish this book. I actually quite liked the fact that we followed Simon through a fair bit of it, and if we had watched more Simon, I probably would have quite wanted to read the book. So I'm really sorry. I know I've just come down really hard on some people's favourite characters, and I was reading this with Connor and I had to DNF, so sorry Connor, but no. Jason Clary I just can't be bothered. I just can't be bothered with this. I'm too old for this crap, man. You know? So that was my DNF, City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare. I think I'm done with Cassandra Clare. I may end up deciding to try again with some of her later stuff. I've heard that some of her later stuff is actually really great. Comment below and let me know what you think. Should I persevere and try and read some of the later stuff? I did like Infernal Devices. Will that mean that I will like other non-Mortal Instrument books? Is it just Jason Clary? Help me out, guys. Let me know what you think. Alright, so those are all the books that I read during September. So now for some stats. I read 8 full books and I read half of 2 other books. So there were some adult, some young adult, and some middle grade. They were a mix of fantasy, sort of fantastical, magical realism, contemporary, sci-fi, mystery, and speculative. I read a total of 3,920 pages. Alright guys, so that is the end of my September Becca's Bookopolothon and Journey Through Wonderland wrap up. Let me know in the comments below if you went in either or both of these readathons, what books you read, if you've read any of the books that I read during this month and what you thought of them, if you're intending to read any of them, and also please don't be too upset about my comments about Cassandra Clare. I'm sorry. Don't forget to go over and check out my BookTube birthday celebration. Leave a question or 5 in the comments of that video so that you can potentially win a book or 2 at the end of the month. My Q&A will go up on the 31st of October. My birthday announcement of the Q&A and the giveaway went up a couple of days ago, so I will link that in the description below. Go and check that out and comment any question that you might have for me, book related or not. Let me know what I should call my coming up TBR game as well. Information about that in that video, which, like I said, is in the description below, as are my social media details if you want to go and be friends with me over on any of those platforms as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.